Welcome to the December 1st bi-weekly Special Fathers Network Dad Zoom call on solo parenting. The 21st Century Dads Foundation is pleased to host tonight's call and feature a number of our Special Father Network mentor fathers. This is a particularly important topic, and I'd like to start by emphasizing we're talking about solo parenting, which is different than single parenting. Single parenting suggests that the other spouse is still alive. And with solo parenting, that's just not the case. So what I'd like to do is provide a brief outline for our call tonight. And we're going to go through a level of self-introductions just to have our mentor fathers make a brief self-introduction, their name, where they're from, what they do. Tell us a little bit about your family and the nature of the connection to special needs. And then we'll go through a series of 3 questions. And the 3 questions simply are, what were the circumstances that led to you becoming a solo parent? The second round of questions will be, what have been the greatest challenges that you've encountered? And then the third round of questions will be, what advice and resources would you suggest to any other parent that finds himself in a similar situation? And then I'll do a quick wrap up. So what I'd like to do is start with Joe Ciriano. Joe, the Zoom stage is yours.
So I'm Joe Ciriano. We live in Burlington, North Carolina, which is about 60 miles west of Raleigh. This is my daughter, Grace. She's 17. She is my connection. She keeps me going. She's the youngest of 4. So her brother's in college, and her 2 older sisters are both married and out of the house and off the payroll.
Joe, thank you for that introduction. And Grace, very nice to meet you as well. Tony, the Zoom stage is yours.
Go by Tony, United States Marine, Army Ranger Airborne, served my country. I'm retired now. My situation goes to, as a solo parent, my son Hezekiah, who's 6 years old, is my wife. Unfortunately, his mother passed away from birth issues, and it's been he and I. And the Lord all this time just making it happen for the past 6 years of his life, and my life, of course.
Thank you for that introduction, Tony. I'd like to go back to you, Joe, and if you could give us a little backstory on what were the circumstances that led to you becoming a solo parent?
So about 10 years ago, my wife passed away from breast cancer. She was 45. At the time, I had 3 of my 4 kids were still at home full time, and the oldest one was off in college. So we kind of went through a 5-year battle with cancer, and setting new norms for the family, trying to figure out how we're going to get through each day. Sometimes, she was a remarkable woman. She did a lot of stuff. Was a community leader. So yeah, it was 2010 when she passed. Grace was 7 years old, or 6. So I'm sorry. She's correcting me.
Joe, thanks for sharing. And again, sorry about your loss, even though it's been 10 years. And Tony, I'm wondering if you can give us a little backstory on your relationship with your wife and what led to the circumstances for her untimely death as well.
I'm so glad you had the father, Mr. Joe. I'm glad you said incredible woman. That's exactly what I would have to say as well. Is we met as I joined my fraternity, becoming a Mason, and she was an Eastern Star. She had been doing what she was doing a lot longer than I was doing what I was doing. So she actually taught me a lot. And she was so involved, a professor, an educator, and she loved kids. She adored kids. So in her situation, she was anemic. And we battled with the whole level of iron she has to have. And unfortunately, when our son came, her iron was extremely low, to the point where he stopped breathing They had an emergency C-section, take him out. He went to a NICU unit, but she had lost so much blood that when they tried to help her, a blood clot ended up going through her lungs. So it was one of those, I just saw my child come into the world, and simultaneously I'm seeing the greatest thing in my world go away. And I had to figure it out since then. So just like I said, again, just pray for the God and to everyone who's helped with support in some way or the other.
Tony, thanks for sharing. It's very sobering to hear you recount the circumstances that led to not only the birth of your son, that joyful moment when Hezekiah comes into the world, but the sad aspect of losing your wife within a very short period of time thereafter. This is a really heavy topic. It's often said that one of the parents' worst nightmares is losing a child, right? Which I can only imagine would be really hard, but I can't even imagine what it would be like losing your spouse and then becoming a solo parent like you've each described. So not to focus on the negative, but reflecting on what it was like. And Joe, going back to you first, the finality of when your spouse passes in your situation is, really heavy. But like you had indicated, your wife was battling cancer for 5 years. So it's not like, it happened abruptly. There was that lead up period of time before she passed, the period of time that you're going through shortly thereafter, and then now the 10 years that have transpired. So if you can reflect on some of the challenges that you experienced, perhaps leading up to that point, and what you've been doing subsequently.
So, one of the biggest challenges is we were married for 22 years when she passed. And so we very much co-parented. And, so one of the biggest challenges was, when you co-parent, you're involved in the decisions, but there always seems to be things that one spouse is stronger at, whether it's paying the bills or, being the disciplinarian, being the soft person. So it was a real challenge. We went through this 5 years, and, it was great in that we had that time. She was able to write each of the kids letters that I gave to them after she passed, just kind of telling them her vision for them, what she sees, what she worries about for them. So, just getting back on your feet, when you're having to manage your own grief, and trying to manage your kids' grief or help them through that grief, it's a tough balance. And what I've found is a lot of dads in this situation ignore themselves. You want to put your children first. Guys, even though I was involved in everything with the kids, guys are just, they're not nurturing as nurturing. You can't replace a mother's touch. And I don't care how much you hug and kiss your kids, there's just that connection between a mother and child. But moving on, I actually helped start a support group because a couple of guys at docs at UNC had called me, and they were looking for a support group all around the country and could not find anything that existed. So they asked me to come in and kind of talk to them, and we came up with a plan, which we subsequently just threw out the window as far as how we thought things were going to work. And that to me was great. It was just fathers, and all of them had younger children in the house. So we were dealing with a lot of the same issues. And we had, we would call each other out on something. You could pretty much say anything you wanted to say there. We're all pretty much in the same stages. Our wives had all passed within a year from when we started the group. So to me, that was a huge help. And I think as far as grace is concerned, one of the biggest challenges for me, I thought we were cruising along pretty good, and then lo and behold, here comes puberty. Now, puberty with a teenage girl is not the funnest thing, no matter how many parents you have in the house. But when you're a dad, it brings special challenges. Now, she has 2 older sisters, and thank God for that. But both of them are out and have families of their own, and don't live that close. So they do like to come in and help me parent and point out when I'm not doing things right. And they've been very helpful with her. But sometimes they just throw their hands in the air and say, I don't know what to, I don't want to do this. I don't know what to do. So, you just kind of have to suck it up. And, one of the things, I tend to be very frank, and I have a philosophy that I put things out there for kids, but I try and do it in like small amounts. So for example, when they ask you where do babies come from, just say from the hospital. If they don't want any more, I don't give them any more. If they want more, then we'll go to the next step. But we do try and be frank and honest. We run into a couple of different issues. So she was in private school through 3rd grade or 2nd grade, and the school just really wasn't equipped to give her what she needed as far as attention and EC type services. So we put her in the public schools, and that was fine till we hit middle school. Middle school had a lot of challenges, as any parent who's had somebody go through middle school knows. We had some issues with bullying, and it wasn't always the typical kids. Sometimes it was the EC kids, and fortunately, Grace has a close relationship with her sister, so she would tell them about it, and of course they would tell me, and then I would get to deal with it. But she wasn't really comfortable telling me what was going on, so that was extremely helpful. But that was a real. It was a struggle for a while, and kind of getting her to understand what was going on with it. The other thing was just because she is a smart kid, keeping her challenged academically was a struggle at times. Some teachers just wanted to let them go, and I'm a firm believer that kids raise and lower themselves to your expectations. So if you don't expect much, you're not going to get much. But one of the other challenges we had was with friends. When she was younger, she had several close friends, and at that age there wasn't a whole lot of difference developmentally. And as I started to age, some of her friends became a little more distant. She wasn't maturing at the same rate that they were, missing some social cues and those types of things. So that was a real challenge, and I was fortunate. I had several good friends with kids her age that made sure that their kids stayed engaged, and that was fortunate on all accounts. It was a really great thing. So, I think those are that and typical teenage stuff. We've had a conversation about whether she's ever going to be able to drive or not. One of the harder things for me was talking to her about the fact that she had Down syndrome. And that there are limitations to that. You're gifted in many different ways, and driving, for instance, may not be one of them. And we still have that conversation sometimes, don't we?
Yeah.
But I think that's just kind of keeping everybody together and supportive within the family. We're fortunate to have a big family, which is nice, and we tend to be very close. So we go. We're together a lot. I haven't been together a lot in the last 8 months, but other than that, we typically are. Unfortunately, she's done really well with remote learning. I will say she is my only kid that's actually made straight A's for the first 9 weeks here. So we were very proud of her with that. And other than missing her friends, I think she likes it, enjoys doing that.
Well, Joe, thank you for sharing. And you made reference almost in passing to the fact that Grace has Down syndrome. And I remember when we did the podcast interview more than a year ago, I think you'd mentioned that for most of Grace's upbringing, she didn't know that she had Down syndrome, right? It wasn't like a big deal, right? You didn't draw a lot of attention to it. And, it was just, it is what it is. And
Right.
I guess at a certain point, like you were sharing, as individuals develop and they get older, and, maybe it's the muscle tone, right? Or some of the social cues that aren't as quickly or easily picked up on. And you have to address that, right? But I think that from my own personal experience, and not raising a child with Down syndrome, but more recently, you might have read that there's this guy down in Maitland, Florida, that did the Ironman triathlon, 21 years old. He just learned how to ride a bike 5 years ago, and here he is swimming 2.4 miles, biking 112 miles, and doing a full marathon, within the allotted time, which is 17 hours or less. And it's like the glass ceiling has been broken, or the Berlin Wall has fallen on the possibilities for what people with Down syndrome can do. So never say never. And I'm hoping that your story, Grace's story, will continue to evolve, and she'll exceed, not only your expectations, but maybe her own, and those that, have sort of the common wisdom of what people with Down syndrome are capable of doing. So thank you again for sharing. Your situation is a little bit different. You were married for 22 years. Your children got to know their mom, maybe Grace a little bit less, so she was so young when your wife passed away. And your situation, Tony, is, I don't want to say completely different. The outcome is the same. You're both solo parents, solo dads, but you're so much closer to the beginning of your journey, Tony, with Hezekiah, who's super young, who never knew his mom, right? She passed away within a day or two of his birth. And I'm wondering if you can reflect on what your journey has been like subsequent to his birth.
Well, you definitely hit the nail on the head there, and that is at the beginning for both he and I. I always remind him his mother's in heaven, and I always try to do things in a way that I think she would want me to. I think of the conversations, and I like Mr. Joe pointed out, letters. The conversations that we always had about the things we would do, or the things we wanted to do, or the way we would parent if given the opportunity, became letters for me in my head of just listening to those conversations almost over and over again. One of the ways I try to honor her every day is to do those things, such as she always brought up things to me. Her name is my wife's name is Kanashi, and she always brings up things such as be involved, be available for teachers. She always thought about educators. So I always make it a point to go and let the teacher know if there's anything you need, let me know. And the teachers would then say, what do you mean by that? And I'll say, anything you need for your class, let us like say a wish list. And every teacher I've met of Hezekiah's is always shocked that I will try to get something from that list and bring to the class and say, well, this is one less thing you have to purchase for your class. And every educator is always shocked that I say it that way, but I remind them that my wife, his mother, was an educator. And she wanted us both to remember that and to have that point of view as a parent, that you are there to help the educators educate your children because you are their first educator. From the beginning, this is my first child, so I didn't know anything. And I told myself, well, I didn't really learn much growing up as far as playing house because I wasn't allowed. No tea parties, no Barbies, no Barbie house. So I actually asked all the therapists, his cognitive therapist, his speech therapist. I asked every and anyone about classes for parenthood. So I found myself a student yet again. The Marine Corps put me through a college for things that are war related, and that's great. That's fine. None of that applies to being a father. So I took classes, basic parenting classes. I took speech classes, um, everything I saw them doing with him. I would ask what the class is, go to the university, let them know my situation, and literally take a class just so I could learn something that would help me continue on his physical therapy and his speech therapy when they're not there. That led to me having the opportunity to work with the governor of Washington as a father advocate. It led to me being a speaker at the convention for therapists in Tacoma, Washington, and to be able to speak to actual professionals from the father standpoint of a solo father standpoint of what it's like to try to get services when everyone expects you to have a mate and you're the only one sitting there. It gave me a chance to speak to service providers who wanted father input from fathers who've used the services. There weren't our groups that I could find where I was in Pullman, Washington at that time. So I was very blessed to meet Luis Mendoza, who led a group in the Seattle side. So I would drive the 5 hours from Pullman, Washington to the Seattle side for meetings whenever I could make it, yearly conferences when I could make it. Anything they did on that side of Washington, it was worth that 4.5 to 5 hour drive to just be surrounded by men, fathers who have raised their children, who are grandfathers, who are godfathers to children who are dealing with everything. And my son is developmentally delayed. Right? Many fathers knew what I was about to walk into, and they would just pour all that wisdom into me. So I always say I may be doing this solo, but I know I have 50 to at least 60 men that I personally met in Washington. I hear their voices. I hear, hey, you might want to try this. So many fathers told me, write a journal, write things down that you're thinking that you would like him to know, tell him, don't be scared to tell him how much you love him. Things that I never heard or was raised probably not to do as far as the way I was raised, a very macho way. So hearing men say, hug your child as much as you can, kiss him as much as you can, especially, and every man kept saying, especially in your situation, Tony, he's going to need as many hugs as he can get since you're it. So I did notice that he's very huggy, but then again, I wonder where he got that from. And next thing I remember is everyone says he got it from you. You always hug people when you meet them. And I thought, yeah, I kind of do. Not really thinking about it. So it first realizing I didn't know what I was doing, asking questions, I realized it started to inspire other fathers. And I ended up becoming the bus driver for his Head Start, doing Zumba as an instructor for the Head Start. It just gave me an exterior, like a second family. And it was just everyone who loved my son, who taught him and was helping him develop. I ended up just assisting in the process, and other parents, coming to aid when they realized I'm doing this solo. So again, I'm grateful for everybody I came across. But I can definitely say to any father out there, don't be scared to say you don't know something. Don't be scared to ask. Not just, yes, you want to hear from other men, but just ask. And yes, some advice may not make sense, but ask and just be open to what you're hearing. And Hezekiah, thank you. You use the advice that applies to your situation, but just don't be scared to ask and say you don't know something. It's humbling.
Tony, thanks for sharing. One of the things that you both made reference to is the fact that you were able to find an extended community beyond your own family. And another thing that I know is really important to both of you is your faith. And I know that that plays a really important role in many families, especially families raising a child with special needs. So thank you again for sharing. In the final round question, I'd like to have you reflect beyond what you've already shared, if there's any resources that you've made use of or that you're aware of that you can suggest to one of the dads who might be listening to this call. Joe, back to you.
So one thing that I had actually discovered right before you and I talked is Gigi's Playhouse. And there is one in Raleigh. There's a chapter in Raleigh, and I work in Raleigh. Unfortunately, Raleigh's an hour's drive, so I had an hour's commute. So it was really hard to get Grace back for things they were doing like during the day with Zumba classes and all of that. But they've been a great resource. Anytime I just have a question, I'll pick the phone up and call them. And really, with COVID, it's worked out a little better for us because Grace has been able to do like they do like a Wednesday afternoon teen yoga class, and so she's actually able to get in and do that. And you can see she's a big state fan. They put they obviously couldn't do it this year, but for the previous 2 years, they put together a program where one parent and their special needs kid got to meet all the football players. They took them through the training rooms and the locker rooms, and then they took them on the field, and it was pretty incredible. And the state's coach Dave Dorn has got a special needs kid, I believe, but he was taking pictures with everybody. They were running plays where they let the kid be the star, and to the point where we were on the football field. They were lining up a full defense and a full offense, and they would hand the ball off to the kid, and they would run it in for a touchdown. And they even had the marching band there. So every time they did that, they would play the fight song. The players would all be jumping around them. So it was a really great experience. And that's something that Gigi's put together. And I think it was one of the girls that works there used to work at the Gigi's Playhouse in Ohio, and one of the coaches up there had a program similar to this. Other thing, I mean, you mentioned faith, and there's always a lot of good resources in your church, I think. If you know, and Tony makes a great point. You know, one of the things that I've found is everybody wants to offer an opinion, and you know, you got to, you know, I found you're always better off if you graciously just accept what they're saying. And, you know, if it doesn't apply to you, toss it away, right? You don't have to argue with them about it. I find that especially true being a widowed father. You know, friends had all these different opinions, but you're different from each other. You know, you used to you've got all these married friends, married couples that you did things with, and now all of a sudden you're a singleton. And while they want to empathize, it's virtually impossible to imagine what it would be like actually going through that process. But part of the faith, it was interesting when I saw John's email, but we were on the Young Life Adult Advisory Committee here. So for years, she grew up, all of my kids grew up going to, you know, the Christmas parties, and we use Young Life leaders for babysitters all through from the time my oldest, which is 30 now, you know, from the time she was 3 years old, 4 years old, we always use them. I guess one of the other things that I really haven't done as much investigation into it, but it's something that I'm really interested in Grace going to, is UNC Greensboro has a program called Beyond Education. And it's a certificate program. It's not a degree program, but it's 4 years. You live on campus. You're in a dorm setting, so you've got to be able to, you know, you've got to meet certain criteria, but they focus primarily on life skills. And I'm starting to see, as I've researched it, a few other universities are coming up with something similar. And I think that's fantastic. You know, because if there's one thing, when I'm gone, you know, I want her to be able to handle herself and deal with life situations. And the last resource, and I mentioned it before, the support group, but they have a great website that was put together. It's called widowedparent.org. And Justin Yopp, Don Rosenstein were the two facilitators that kind of started our group. And they've got a whole team there, but it's since expanded. It's not just dads. It's now they've got a single mothers group. And but there's some great resources on that website.
Joe, thanks again for sharing. And it is important to try to figure out how to surround yourself with the right resources. And I'm wondering, Tony, even though you're close to the beginning of your journey, because Hezekiah is 6, 7 years old, if there's been any resource or resources that you've been able to experience to date that have been instrumental.
I wanted my son to know as much as he could about his mother. So I actually, Hezekiah's middle name is Alice. He's named after my wife's grandfather. And Grandpa is still alive. And I asked him, even though some would say, and I know this sounds wrong when you think about it, but some people would say a contract has been met. He has no obligation to help Hezekiah if he doesn't want to. And that's what I was hearing a lot of people say, is don't bother him. But I said, I'll let him decide that for himself. So I asked the gentleman, I said, sir, is there any advice or anything you would like to pass on to Hezi. I'll bring him to you as soon as he comes out of the NICU, and you could just hang out with him, and you could just talk with him. And he said, please, I would like to meet him. So I'm sitting there with a 95-year-old man who had a lot to say. And the first thing he said to me is, you better make sure you show Hezekiah everything that you two did, because I hear you two did a lot of things for the community. And it dawned on me that I was so not thinking about myself or anything that his mother and I did, but he made it a point to be for that to be the first thing he said to me. Instead of even saying hi, he just said, come over here, young man. I want you to make sure. So that stays with me, that we show him everything we did for our community. So Hezekiah has gone to Masonic Scholarship Fund dinners that I'm the grand chaplain of my fraternity, and I headed the scholarship fund. It was given to somebody else because I was mourning, but I called the person at the head, the Grand Master, and I said, can I still come to dinners? Can I bring Hezekiah so we can see young people receive scholarships from us? And they said, of course you can. You ran it. Come on, bring him. And for Hezi to get dressed up he was 3 years old, dressed up. We flew from Washington to Texas where we were doing this, and he sat and watched teenagers from high school receive thousands and thousands of dollars. And we do this every year in Texas. Hezekiah watched me receive my third-degree black belt because I was respecting grandpa's request, and that is, it may not be a service to say, but I think what I learned is the more he sees and the more he experiences that his mother and I did individually together, that what our passions were, truly and honestly, those are the things he's going to remember. And he always brings up things to me that I didn't think he was paying attention to. His mother and I loved road trips. We just like to go for drives. This child is now going on 7 years old in February, and he's visited over 35 states. Because he and I, during the summer, we get in a car and we just go. And I tell him, we got 2 months. As long as you're back in time for school, it's okay. And he goes, yay, road trip. And that's exactly what his mother and I would do during the summer when she was not being an educator. I would take all my vacation time at one time and we'd just hit the road. So to be 7, he tells his class every day, his first grade class, I've been to this state and this state and this state, and he talks about the things he saw there, and the teacher can't believe it, but he can write and give details. So again, it may not be services, but I think it's so important that we do things with our children in this situation that make memories, not let everything be a movie, not let everything be something that they're doing with their tablet. Or so it may be a different kind of service. It's just I'm just giving him time. I'm giving him all my time. And when I do those things, I realize it's just he and I talking. And I'll say to him, he'll sometimes see me crying and he'll say, what's wrong? And I'm like, I miss your mom. And I'll just tell him about his mom. And we're driving, so we have nothing else to talk about. So we'll just talk about his mom for about a state or two. So that's what I've learned. If other than just the services, is showing him, and I say that to say that life is short. I may not have the opportunity myself later to show him the things that his mother and I did, like scholarship funds, martial arts, whatever we did. I want him to, she went to Grambling University. So I took him for a drive to Grambling University. And during the Battle of the Bands, when everyone is there and everyone is going to Grambling, New Orleans, and all that for other reasons, he got to see the one of the greatest bands perform, and he looked at me and he goes, "Mommy played on that band?" I said, "Yes, she was the clarinet player on that band once." So for him to know what that band sounds like, it meant the world to me, because I can say it again, may not be a service, but the service is you're showing your children the things, the path you walked. They may not be able to fill our shoes, but they can at least know the paths we walked and the things that helped make us who we are. And I think if there's anything I've done right, I would say is there's memories he has that I probably would have never made it a point to show him or have him go through had Grandpa not said, "Young man, make sure you show him what it is the two of you felt passionate about. Make sure you show him, not just tell him, but show him." And I'm just so grateful I had a chance to meet Mr. Hollis, and he has since then passed. But since that conversation, um, just during this COVID situation. So when all this, I was hoping I can, have him see a video or something. But yeah, since COVID, I found out he has passed, and so he started off this year strong. And I told Hezzy, and he says, "I remember Grandpa," and I'm so glad I left it up to them to meet, because he at least knows why he's named Hollis as a middle name, and he got to meet his 95-year-old grandpa. So I'm just so grateful.
Tony, thanks for sharing. That is pretty powerful.
The reason why I said grandpa, and I just realized that's great grandpa, is in this ironic situation, the father of my wife did not want to meet him. He did not, he was just mourning. He just lost his daughter. And knowing that his grandson was in a NICU unit, he just said, "I can't do this." And he walked away. So for his grandpa to walk away, but his 95-year-old great grandpa to say, "I want to meet him," he basically took the role of those two. And he is who Hezekiah calls grandpa. But you are right, that's his great grandpa. And he doesn't really seem to notice a difference. I mean, I forgot myself. Sorry. Thanks for reminding me.
No, I'm sort of a stickler when it comes to generations and ages and things like that. My grandfather, who I got to know as an adult, died at age 93, and he got to know each of our 5 kids. So he was their great grandpa.
Yes.
And it's remarkable, to be able to span that many generations. So thank you again for sharing. And what I heard you talking about was providing experiences, what I think of as experiential learning, different from the classroom type of learning, different from what you might learn in the military, like you suggested. And, I think those type of learning experiences are the ones that really stick with people, because we read things, we forget them, we see things, we forget them, but there's something about being present, right? It's contextual. So thanks again for sharing. So I just want to say thank you to both of you for sharing your stories. Completely different, right? Just based on your life's experiences and the circumstances. And these are just 2 stories of many that fathers in the Special Fathers Network are able to share. And it would be great to see you to perpetuate the connection that you've made tonight, because Joe, I think you could be an excellent mentor to Tony. And whenever I listen to dads like yourself, I always pick up something, right? So I know that there's other dads out there within the network, and then the larger number of dads who are not in the network yet, who can learn from the experiences that you've shared. So on behalf of the 21st Century Dads Foundation and the Special Fathers Network, I just want to thank you for participating, being mentor fathers. Each of them has recorded Special Fathers Network Dad to Dad podcast. Joe's has been out for a while, and then Tony's has just come out recently, or will be coming out recently. And this is the 13th in a series of 14 biweekly dad Zoom calls. Next program will be on December 15th, and the topic is teen parenting. So these are men who become fathers before they were age 20. And that is just the reality of some. And we have some extraordinary fathers within the network who are advocates for young fathers, men who are teenagers raising kids, and some of them including special needs kids as well. So for more information, you can look at the show notes, and you can always go to the 21stCenturyDads.org website. Thanks again, and we hope to see you next time.